Well, happy Saturday, SMITE fans. The SPL is back. We've got a great one for you today. It's the SPL, of course, powered by Alienware. We want to thank our friends at Alienware for sponsoring Season 8 of the SPL. Make sure to go online, give them a follow at Alienware on Twitter and Instagram, and then alienwarearena.com for giveaways and so much more. You can grab some gear as well. Load up on some of that Alienware gear, and you can play like our pros here. So thanks again to Alienware for sponsoring Season 8 of the SPL. Mifflin's with me there to kick off this fantastic day of Pro Smite action, and Mifflin might be the most important day of the year yet. We've got two very close matchups on the slate.
Man, I am pumped. And Dave, I'm not going to bury the lead at all. I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm pumped for. Leviathans up against Jade Dragons, Dave. And we don't have to wait that long. That's the first one up. Get rolling. Get the stuff we got to do before we can talk about it. I want to get to P's and P's and interviews as quickly as possible.
That's right. We'll get to talk to PBM later on in a pregame interview. But let's take a look ahead at what matchups we are talking about here. The Atlantis Leviathans versus the Jade Dragons starts off this Saturday in Smite action, and then followed up by the Tartarus Titans versus the Solar Scarabs, which is a equally important matchup, I think, for both of those teams to start to build on what has been a tough early start to the year. So the big one first up, first overall, Miff, is a battle for first place here in this case between the Atlantis Leviathans and the Jade Dragons, because you'll find both of these two teams up top, no surprise, 3-0. This is the biggest test that both of these teams have faced up to this point here, Mifflin. And then, of course, our Tartarus Titans versus Solar Scarabs matchup, very important as well. Scarabs with just the one win, and the Titans yet to get a win in that win column, so important for the Titans team as well. Let's get down to brass tacks, though, Mifflin. Leviathans versus Dragons up first. And specifically, let's look at the Leviathans. This is a team that carried over a lot of their play style from Season 7 on over here into Season 8. Swap from the solo lane down to Hunter for Yarkor. But one guy that stayed the same and has brought some of the best support play we've seen so far in Season 8 is Rongyu. This guy's playing out of his mind.
He is, man, and no one could ever accuse Rongyu of lacking in the confidence department. He's the main reason I gave the Sanguine Squad the moniker of villains back in Season 7. If you ever check out this guy's Twitter, and you should, because he's tweeting out funny stuff all the time, it's always confidence and machismo coming from him. Even last night or this morning, he had an interaction with PBM and gave away what he was thinking he was going to play today in this set. Looks like, if we were to believe what he said on Twitter, it's going to be a little bit of Horus coming through from Rongyu, but we got to talk about the play on field at least a little bit, Dave. And what is there to say that hasn't already been said about this guy? He is constantly facilitating his team. He can play that aggressive style if he needs to. Back in Season 7, a couple games with Erlang Shen, Horus, that run-it-down style. But he can also play the counter-engagers. Get a little look at the Terra here. Occasionally goes towards the Khepri. I've seen the Geb come through every now and then. This guy is versatile and powerful.
He's got the second most assists in the league right now. 5-9 and 66 through 7 games is Rongyu. Versatility, I think, maybe the most important thing you mentioned there, Mifflin. Powerful, right up in that conversation as well. Look, if the Horus ends up getting played, I'm happier for it. We see these rotations coming out of the mid lane, guys like Hurriwin playing Giannis. I'm sure we'll touch on that here in a little bit. But something like that Horus pick adds so much potential to your team fight, your ability to rotate around the map, make some impact plays, especially if you start off full-on Warrior Tabi like we have seen here in some competitive games as of late. Time to shift gears, though. Jade Dragons, his opponent over there in the support role is going to be Polar Bear Mike. I said that wrong. You had 66 assists through 7 games. PBM is 8-4 and 74 through 6 games. So this Jade Dragons team has absolutely rolled, and Polar Bear Mike is maybe at the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, PBM is going to be the shot-calling center of your team. He brings fantastic energy, and everything that I said about Rongyu can be said of him as well. They're both incredibly versatile players, but only one of them has earned the eye of aggro in his A-Pinion show. What was it? It was maybe
it's like he knows he's on camera.
Contention for the GOAT or something like that. Is that what Aggro said about him? And I can't disagree. This guy has consistently been playing on top-tier teams. He's been a common thread throughout the years. I think he's one that we have to keep our eyes on, and that's not news to anyone.
Feels unfair. It looks like Mike knows he's on camera, like the laugh, the smile, the slight bashful look off to the side. The man knows somehow that the
Oh my
camera's
God,
coming to
dude.
him. Look, you talk about versatility with him. Xing Chen, Artio, Ares, Hercules, Cerberus, Sobek in his last 6 games. He has not repeated a support pick once so far in the SPL this year. 6 games, 6 different picks for PBM, and all 6 of them have worked. He's died twice at most in any of these games. He's gotten 2 kills at least in half of his games, and then the assists just kind of run wild. So you talk about versatility with Rongyu, you've got to mention it here with PBM as well. I wonder, Myth,
so
how
sick.
aggressive these guys might start to try to get here in this laning phase. We know that they like to rotate and make plays happen over the map, but PBM in the lane, look, you bring out something like the Hercules, you bring out something like the Cerberus. Maybe a chance for some duo lane kills, maybe a little bit of action there in duo today.
I think so. The differentiating factor between PBM and Rongyu, I think Rongyu a little bit more focused on playing around his team, whereas PBM can be that solo agent carry. I mean, back on the World's Finals or the World Semis, he brought out the Fenrir, went like 12-1 on his own or something like that. This guy can do whatever his team needs to, and then sometimes even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And for reference, looking over towards Rongyu, Yamoja in his last 3 games, so you imagine that's something that the Jade Dragons are privy to going into this matchup. The big man himself, PBM, joins us now for the pregame interview. I'm sure we'll be able to squeeze some good information out of the man. PBM, thanks for joining us here going into this big matchup. What are feelings like with the team? Look, you guys are 3-0 here in the league so far. This is maybe the toughest matchup you guys have faced yet. Is there any extra anxiety or nerves going into this game?
No, not really. Not for me, at least. I just think I personally approach every match with just like confidence and just kind of wanting to learn more than anything. So,
yep.
Just taking every set as a learning experience. Obviously, they're a very good team, and I'm just excited to play.
Well, PBM, your team last year and this year as well has kind of earned that title of the early game kings, right? You guys dominate matches before the 20-minute mark. I think that's fair to say for the most part. But we have heard from a couple of your teammates saying that you're not just early game slated. You guys can play at every single phase. It just so happens that no one can keep you there for 30 or so minutes. Is that the same read that you have as well?
I mean, I'm not going to say that we don't like to play aggressive if we think we have an opportunity, but I think it's kind of a goofball take a little bit. Like, literally our first game of the year, I played Xing 10 and we won in like 25 minutes, and people are like, oh, Mike only plays with pressure. Here he goes, just kind of running around again, but I played Xing 10, man. Like, I don't know what to say.
Well, I saw that there was like a little riff going on between you and Rongyu on Twitter. I think, would you say, Miff, when it was the Horus that he replied with, this is what you're going to be picking tomorrow?
Love that little guy.
Look, obviously, there's
ratio,
some jest happening here.
True.
Yeah, PBM gets ratioed. That's the real highlight of
okay,
this
well, I set him up, right? Like, I'm literally tossing him the lob. Right. Like, if he doesn't slam that one home, that's on him.
Right, if he doesn't knock it in, that is on him.
Right.
How worried are you of the Rongyu Horus here today in this matchup?
I'm not. I really don't think he's going to play a Horus. He's going to play He's going to play one of Yamoja, Sobek, Ymir, because that's what he does. Rongyu is a really good player, but I think he's also very predictable in the draft. Not to say that's always a problem. That's just like how he drafts with his team. But yeah, I'd be very surprised if he plays anything other than Yamoja, Sobek, or Ymir.
Well, it's been Yamoja and Ymir 4 out of 6 times in the last 6 games here for Rongyu. PBM, thanks so much for sitting down with us. I'll let you go get ready. Best of luck in your matchup here today. Well, moving on from the fantastic interview that PBM gave us, make sure to check out some of those sweet jerseys that you just saw PBM wearing. Insight Apparel Company is our jersey sponsor this year in the SPL. If you go to shop.smiteproleague.com, you can pick yourself up one of those sweet Jade Dragons jerseys. I know we got a lot of Leviathans fans in the chat and watching as well, so there's some awesome Leviathans jerseys, hoodies, t-shirts, all that sort of fun stuff. Insight Apparel Company, the official apparel sponsor of the SPL here in Season 8, and that's shop.smiteproleague.com. So Mifflin, if we're kind of rounding out our thoughts here going into what is the biggest matchup of the year so far between the Leviathans and the Dragons, we've talked so much about the support matchup for good reason. Both of these guys between Rongyu and PBM impact this game on such a high level. We have to look at the mid lane, right? And we have to talk about Hurriwan. We have to talk about Shinto as well. And specifically, the question that's been raised, we talked about it on the SPL waiting room. Do you have to ban out Hurriwan Giannis?
Do you have to? Maybe not, and it seems like that's what the majority of the SPL has largely agreed on, almost as if a point of pride. I'm not going to ban his Yanis, we can certainly beat it, but so far, no one's been able to beat this Yanis. Hurrywin, the top KDA in the league for a reason, has been allowed to play his top pick as well. You gotta imagine if a ban does find its way towards this Yanis, Hurrywin has to at least look an iota worse on the next best god, right? So maybe at least try it out, but it's so hard to toss a ban targeted towards this Yanis when there is so much in the meta that has to be addressed right now in Season 8.
Well, Myth, I'll ask you the same question, but about Shinto this time, not about the Yanis, about the Tiamat instead. Remember, Tiamat had seen largely no success at all leading up into the SPL. I think 0-3 is how that pick started out. And then against the Kings, the Leviathans picked it in 3 straight games. Loss, but then win-win for Tiamat. Her first 2 wins of the year came in that setup against the Kings. 2-0-7 for Shinto in the first game, 2-0-8 for Shinto on Tiamat in the second game. Where does Tiamat, in your mind, start to fall on the picks and bans? Is that a pick that's worthy of being banned out just yet?
Tiamat is in such an interesting spot because I think that her strength lies in the same place that the strength of Apollo lies. It's the ability to split up the map and have your presence be known everywhere. Tiamat, a little bit more so, she can be essentially 2 places at once with her lizards going down a lane. I think that is a god that is a very slow starter, needs a lot of power before she can get involved. So the strategy to Tiamat is blow her out in the early, make sure she isn't able to get her feet under her. But it's pretty hard to do that, especially against a team like the Jade Dragons.
Well, Myth, to start off the day, you said let's skip everything and jump right into picks and bans, and you will get your wish. Picks and bans for Game 1 between the Jade Dragons and the Atlantis Leviathans start right now. The battle of the 2 undefeateds begins right here on the SPL, powered by Alienware. Now, the first 6 bans, I think, are going to tell us a lot about some of the questions that I've just raised. Where does Yanis start to land here in the mindset of the Leviathans? Do the Jade Dragons really believe that it's going to be Yamoja, Sobek, Ymir for Rongu? How scared are they of those picks from the Leviathan support? I think we're going to learn a lot about the mindset of these 2 teams in just the first 6 bans to start off this game. A set first and foremost overall. Mifflin strictly by the tier list there makes some sense, and the first question of the set has been answered. We're going to force Hurrywin to play something else.
Yeah, finally now the Leviathans taking it to the Jade Dragons early on, saying you have to go down to at least your next best pick. I'm sure Hurrywin has certainly got the capacity to play just about anything at a high level, but now we get to see him put to the test here today. Jade Dragons remove Set and now Surket as well. This is almost ignoring the largest meta picks. Guan Yu still out there, Athena still available, the meta ADCs, even Tiamat still working her way through, and in a team that we said, or both teams that we said are playing through their supports, no support bans coming through as of yet either. This is both teams swinging wild haymakers at each other.
Wow, Surket and Scylla both off the table. Haymakers being swung specifically at Hurrywin, because remember, in the games where Hurrywin, I mean, maybe it's game at this point where Hurrywin wasn't able to play that Yanis. He went over to the Scylla. So now Hurrywin's going to have to dig is maybe an overstatement here. He's going to have to go down to the Scylla. In the last 6 games, for clarity's sake, looking back, the last 6 games for Hurrywin, Yanis 4 times, Scylla a couple of times. Kings did ban out the Yanis in both games up against Hurrywin. So now the third god for Hurrywin will come to the forefront, and I think it's worth mentioning. Our storyline along with Hurrywin has been, look, he's incredible at Yanis, maybe the best, if not absolutely the best in the world right now on this pick. His Scylla looked fantastic as well, 7-0-12 on Scylla, as well as 5-1-7 on Scylla. This guy is a world-class mid laner outside of just those 2 picks, so I think your point stands. He maybe looks an iota worse than he did on those 2 picks, but you better believe that the Jade Dragons don't always have to rely on that mid lane. And maybe they still will here, Mifflin. Tiamat, not banned away from Shinto, but taken away, locked in first and foremost for the Dragons.
That's interesting. I was expecting Hurrywin to go towards his Baba Yaga, or maybe even the Persephone, both gods that he played a little bit throughout Season 7, but instead, Tiamat taken away is a pretty smart pick. We know that the Leviathans themselves really do enjoy the versatility that Tiamat brings to the late game, but they leave so much on the table with all these targeted bans.
Wow.
You can't feel bad about getting King Arthur and Sobek in your top 2. Talk about a fantastic front line.
And that's important for Julio as well. One matchup that we didn't get to talk much about in the pregame is Fino-K versus Julio. On the waiting room this week, I highlighted Julio and Haddix, the two, quote, newcomers to the SPL out of the solo lane, and their dominance last week in the SPL. Julio up against Fino-K here today, I think is going to be pretty telling as far as where the heat lies here for the solo lane newcomer to the SPL. The Jade Dragons, they get some power on their next two as well. On Her has been a popular first pick for PandaCat, and the Jade Dragons are going to get that pick alongside the Kulkala.
It was PandaCat who was first picking On Her first in Season 8 in the SPL, so it makes sense that he wants to go towards that standard aggression, but I'm surprised somehow 5 picks come through, now 6 picks, and Athena left by the wayside. Sobek already picked up by the Leviathans, likely going to be going into support, but Athena has fantastic flex potential both into the jungle and into solo. I'm surprised that both these teams not willing to take it up here. We'll get to see how much they truly value that pick in this second phase of bans. Seems to me like it's going to be a Yemoja ban first, but you gotta think that the Leviathans have their eyes on the defender of Olympus.
Yeah, it would make some sense. 6 games, 6 different picks for PBM so far in Season 8 of the SPL. And it might have to be different yet again. No Yemoja, no Ymir, no Sobek. Could be an Ares ban here for the Leviathans if they want to take a dig at PBM once more. A Wheelix on the other side taken away. It is indeed an Ares ban. Wow, so they are really trying to limit what Polar Bear Mike can play here in game number 1. You got some Hurrywind off the table with your first couple of bans, then a dig at Fino-K with the Guan Yu. Then you pick Sobek and King Arthur, so limiting as well the solo lane and the support a little bit further. Kulkullen falls to Fino-K nonetheless. But now realizing that PBM still needs a pick, Miff, you're going to take away Yemoja and Ares.
But it leaves so much on the table still. We know PBM loves that Cerberus pick. We know PBM can play Athena. We know all these things about him, but instead it is the Yemoja and Ares ban. Horus being hovered here by the Leviathans could be Sobek flexing into the soul lane, and Rongyu going to be proven not to be a liar on Twitter, but that has yet to be locked in as of now. Look, I think that both teams come away with an incredibly strong top 3 already. Tiamat, Kulkullen, On Her cannot sing the praises of that draft enough, but I have to give maybe a slight edge to the Leviathans here because it plays into their own process a lot better. Tiamat is a late game slated god, so we're going to have to see Hurrywind play a lot slower in mid. We know that PBM says that he's not really, or he doesn't believe that his team is just that early game behemoth. They have the capacity to play late, but I think we would be ignoring the facts if we said that they aren't at least one of the best early game, or maybe an early game specialist team. And they make up for that a little bit here with the Fenrir lock-in. How dare I say they aren't going to slate it a little bit more so towards early in the later half of their draft. But the Leviathans, with Raijin, Sobek, and King Arthur, screams late-game team fight to me. And that's all they've been looking for the last 2 years.
How could we forget about PBM's Fenrir, right? That's on us. We haven't seen it yet this year, but it's going to be 7 games and 7 different picks now for PBM in the support role for the Jade Dragons. Hunbats will be the final draft pick here for the Jade Dragons. Sam for Soccer loves himself some team fight setup, and he's got a good one in the Hunbats.
He does. Now, there's so many tools to burn away those beads. Hunbots with a Fear No Evil. If he burns beads off of 2 targets, creates 2 phenomenal targets for PBM to pull through with the Ragnarok. Leviathans take Daji in their last slot. Junglers getting slated to 9th and 10th pick, but still, Daji, you don't feel too bad taking that one away. It's the exact same as Hunbots, at least able to burn some beads, set up for Sobek so we can find the Plux and engage those fights. I like both these drafts, but worth noting, Jade Dragons quadruple physical stack with a late game slated mage. Tiamat might not have the threat throughout the early to force a magical defense item pickup.
In Mifflin, I've sung the praises of PBM and his versatility in the draft. Sam for Soccer, 7 games, 7 different picks out of the jungle. Susano, Robin, Fenrir, Thor, Osiris, Thanatos, and now the Hunbats in the 7th game of the year here for the Jade Dragons. Difficult team to ban is maybe what we're starting to learn here. What does this Leviathans team want to do here in Game 1, Mifflin, in order to unseat the Dragons as maybe the favorites in the league?
I like you throwing me a low, slow one, Dave, because it's exactly what the Leviathans have been looking for the entirety of their SPL careers. This is a team comp that just screams to me, late game team fight, 5v5, fight me inside the Fire Giant pit, wait till that 25-minute mark, and then meet me at the Gold Fury. Up until then, I'm expecting a slow start, potentially some pressure towards the duo lane. Daji can gank very easily off a Sobek block, but outside of that, don't expect to see them put up their, or dig their heels in the 3v3.
What do you think about the Hunbats here for Sanford Soccer? What does the activity curve start to look like? You expect early fireworks, maybe wait until the mid game, or is late game really when this pick wants to strike?
The second he hits level 5, Hunbots is online and ready to get involved. That Fear No Evil is such a strong and versatile tool to use, at least to burn beads, if not for beads, to burn lives as well. Expect Sanford Soccer to rush boots, get him online, and then immediately make his way into any singular lane. They're going to be looking to fight very early. The 3v3 for the Jade Dragons is incredibly strong. You even just call it the 2v2, or just the roaming jungle pair that is going to be PBM and Sanford Soccer. Fenrir and Hunbots together, that's a brutal combo.
Well, right now, as of right now, granted with one more game in hand, Julio has 3 more kills than FinoK. So in one less game, FinoK has 3 less kills, but maybe a close matchup there in the solo lane. King Arthur on one side, Cocoan on the other. What kind of impact do you expect both those two to make?
There's not going to be a ton of kill potential in the solo lane, and that's kind of the exact same thread that you're going to have when all these behemoths out of solo match up against each other. But throughout the first couple of levels, we might see a slight edge in favor of King Arthur. Just straight up has more abilities. Just legitimately can press more buttons than Cullen throughout the early. But expect both of these guys to move into that Bruiser build. King Arthur likely going to go for the Stone of Gaia. Then once he's got that passive regen rolling his way, he's really only going to fall to maybe a jungle gank.
Well, it's the biggest game of the year, and who else better to take us in than Finch in aggro?
Thank you, Dolson Myth. Biggest game of the year so far. Don't want to get too Homer Simpson on you, though. No Athena picked or banned in this one, aggro. A surprise, perhaps, but I don't think either of these teams are complaining about their draft. Mike on a signature pick in this Fenrir Hurwint. Going to give us his Tiamat. Can't wait to see how that works on the other side. Leviathans, Turnabog, Raijin, Daji for Panatom. A lot to keep our eyes on this time. And look at how Mike is starting with that Sunder. He likes to do this, especially on a pick like Fenrir.
It just gives you solo kill potential up against gods like Turnabog and Raijin and Daji. I think that this is the exact type of pick the Jade Dragons were looking for Mike in this game. And I am a little surprised to not see the Jade Dragons go Athena, if only because that, in Mike's career, was historically a signature pick for him back when he first came in the league. But certainly his playstyle has changed a lot since then. He was a Geb Athena main back in the day. You're not seeing Mike play Geb a whole lot these days. It's putting the pedal to the metal. It's picking things like this Fenrir and trying to get aggressive. You can't get too aggressive up against this lane that the Leviathans have. Turnabog has more safety than most of their ADCs against Fenrir because, yes, he has a dash, but going into the wall with the dash will cancel the Brutalize, and Rongyu will always have kill potential on that Sobek.
An early back from Mike. He went the boots 2 start, so he'll be finishing those off. Looks like reinforced Greaves will be the first item pick up for him, and he's ready to get right back into the action. Other starter items to look at, it's Eye of the Jungle for Panatom, Bumbers for Sam. I don't think a big surprise for Sam what he's going, but is Eye of the Jungle here? I mean, I suppose if they're auto-attack focused, you want Eye of the Jungle for that attack speed at the beginning of the game.
It feels really good. It lets you clear pretty quickly. And Daji, she is more ability based. She's all about those in-hand cancels to get the burst damage off. But your passive makes you want to auto attack a little bit more on the jungle camps. Her cooldowns are fairly long early games, so going something like the Eye of the Jungle to help facilitate your clear be a little bit better makes sense to me. And think about the way that the Leviathans like to play. They like to play a little bit slower, try and set up big objective fire giant fights. Those are always in the jungle, and Protector of the Jungle is really good in those sorts of situations. So I don't mind the pickup at all for Panatom. I'm more worried about how effective he's going to be in the face of the inevitable upgraded shells that both Panda Cat and Hurwind I'm expecting to pick up. I'd be surprised if we didn't see at least 2 here on the side of the Dragons.
But the relic that has me worried in this early game is this Blink for Sam. Is he not worried about getting Palowed on cooldown by Panatom here? Really no CC immunity for Sam in this early game. So he's going to have to be real careful, or Panatom should likely have a pretty free matchup there up against him.
Agree, that is the concern, but Mike's doing a good job baiting right now. Look at where Sam is on the rotation over towards this purple buff, and he's already gotten the pluck from Rongyu. That could be kill potential.
Well, here it is, the early leap in, but the jumps don't land from Mike, but everyone's here. It might not matter if the Impale connects. First blood of this Clash of the Titans goes to the Dragons. And how does it start? With pressure over in duo on the back of Mike on his signature Fenrir.
That's pre-planning. It's being ahead of what's going to happen, going in with that predetermined game plan. Perfect work by Mike to get the pluck out. Uses the very last of his mana pool, and he knows that he can be that aggressive and not die because of the start of picking up the tank boots early. It gives him no extra power from boots 2. You sit at 10 power for both, but you end up with so much more tankiness and so much more survivability that you can afford to make risky, aggressive plays like that and set up the first blood.
And Final K gave an interview on this team's early game. He doesn't think they're an early game team, in quotes. I think that he just has the read that his team just plays the early game correctly. If everyone else started doing what they did, he feels like their matchup would go out a bit more, but it's just them with this read on the early game in their minds, and it looks like it here. I mean, other teams are doing the boot start. Yes, we've seen Genetics go for this before, of course, but Mike using it to sort of leverage this early game so well, now picking up the Benevolence to start giving up some of that farm. Looks like he might not even come back and see Panda Cat anymore. We'll see where he ends up, but electing to make use of that power spike really well there is Mike. The Leviathans, of course, not out of this yet. We know they're going to be a bit of a slower team, and I think they're really going to get their big power spike right about now with Panatom on this Palau.
Gotta use it effectively. I mean, if you can hold on to the beads and use your Palau for CC immunity whenever Sam or Mike jumps in on you, it's going to be a blink from Sam, of course. If you can react to that Fear No Evil sound with that Palau, you're going to put yourself in a great spot because now you can force Sam's jump, and you should be able to pull off that just about every single time. We'll see how accurate Panatom can be. I think Daji, when Shell isn't in the meta, is in a really good spot. I think she scales really well. She's got decent enough fight potential. She's got some really good matchups. I don't know that these are the matchups that I would want to see if I'm Panatom, but certainly the lack of CC immunity for a lot of characters on the other side feels good for him. He's just going to have to get some way to be effective late game through the upgraded shells, because all of Daji's burst potential in the late game is through blink auto, one auto, and that will nearly delete most carries, but Shell eats that one proc, it eats your Hydra's proc, it eats everything on that, at least for now, until that's changed in the next patch. So I was expecting to see Daji this phase, just not this early. I expected it after the Shell nerf.
Yeah, I believe that's on the 18th, right? We'll be getting all those new changes in. We have bonus balance, I believe in, like some changes to shifters, non-Keelay, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But the Shell change, not here just yet. Doesn't seem like, though, really these teams have been too deterred from picking up the on-Keelay. A little bit of a price increase, a little less power on it. Physical power, obviously. But they're not done with that as Mike moves into our core. The pillar well placed. Desert Fury there too. And they get the kill and the beads perfectly executed from this duo lane. And listen, man, I know there's a lot of talk about that MO Rat for duo lane, the Jeff Barrett duo lane, but I don't know, man. This Mike Panda Cat one, it might be the best we've ever had.
I do know it is the best we've ever had. They are the most successful for sure. The 2 world championships, sure, for Emil and Raffer, but you want to talk about longevity and being dominant throughout their careers. There is no question in my mind who the best duo lane of all time is, and it's PBM and Panda Cat. And Yarkor falls to a similar mistake that we see Giannis players make sometimes, where you feel like you should be super safe. You don't have to worry about something like Brutalize. I'll just go into the wall, but then he's not near a wall. He walks into the dead center of the lane, and in Season 8, these lanes are wide, and it ends up being in a position where he can't get to a wall fast enough. He dashes, but goes basically nowhere.
And that one, I don't know if it's 100% for the Jade Dragons there. You got to be pretty on with just about everything, but they did enough to make that one work. And Yarkor now taking an early spill alongside Rongyu, this duo lane behind at the beginning of the game, which is really making me think this 3v3 for the Leviathans is going to be clutch. It's going to have to come in clutch. We already thought so with how much pressure we're putting on Panatom, not just to find Palau value in the early, but then to find a way around this shell in the late game. And I think it's going to be easier for him if he starts this up sooner rather than later, but where does he go? Duo feels like a tough option already with how well Mike and Panda Cat have been playing. So maybe it is just in the mid with this 3v3, but where would you like him to go? It looks like it's the Greater Scorpion. They'll at least get some enhanced buffs and start up this Fury. Not a huge deal this is going down in favor of any particular team. The bigger deal is we're about a minute away from a big objective on the left side.
And the Jade Dragons likely thanking the Leviathans for taking care of that for them, because
Yep.
they've got the pressure and feel like the ones more likely to end up heading towards that Gold Fury. As where a Panatom should go, I mean, I think that with the tank boots completed for FineOK, he's out the window as far as a gank target. Hurry is really the only one left, but Tiamat has that mitigation, has the good leap. Hurry's constantly putting these serpents down in the mid lane in order to maintain wave priority. So he doesn't have his ultimate up in the mage form all the time, but he's using it pretty effectively. I've liked his use of it so far. Maybe with those minions in tow, remember those serpents actually give a good amount of damage reduction to the targets they hit. They make you deal less damage, and if you get tagged by one of those, you're all in onto this Tiamat. Becomes pretty hard to execute on between that damage reduction and her mitigation in the base form.
It can feel tough to know when to engage, but teams have been able to find their window. Maybe not to necessarily kill the Tiamat, but to play around her. We've seen Tiamat kind of get her damage, kind of no matter who's piloting her so far in the SPL. It's been more of a question of can they really leverage that into super valuable damage. You know, is it just poke that doesn't end up resulting in kills, or are you actually doing relevant damage to set up for winning these team fights? So that's going to be the key question for Hurry. Could he show us on that? Vin had a great performance on it as Mike gets plucked in, but uses the opportunity to get aggressive. Shinto responds with an ult of his own, and the beads come out from Panatom, so he goes up under the Palo, and Mike should be dead to rights here. Nothing for him to do. But what? There's no follow-up. Okay, Panatom got the dot on him, so Mike goes down. Now the pluck ends up landing on the Sam, who's all still low. Leviathans respond with a 3v3 battle and come out on top.
Yeah, that Fear No Evil just does not do enough there for Sam for Soccer. It's a 2-for-0. And Mike was just on a different page, it felt like, than Heroin. Panatom was about to back in mid, thinking that Hurry and Mike would likely just give up those left side mids, and then Mike decides to jump in, thinking that Heroin's damage was going to be a little bit higher. This type of start, I like the Conduit gem on Tiamat. I think she needs the help early on in order to clear. I just don't think her early game damage feels that impactful to me at all. It really takes items for this character to feel strong, and maybe Mike just overestimated his own damage in that moment. Got the Sunder off at the last moment onto Rongyu, and that's probably what Sam was looking for, was to come in and help out and try and get at least one return kill, but it ends up setting Sam a little bit behind as he goes in and finds basically nothing.
That was really weird when Panatom starts that fight off with beads, I think on reaction to Mike's engage. But they found a way to turn that one around, gets the dot damage onto Mike. That seals off that kill, and then as you said, Sam ends up a bit overcommitted. They find one more. And what a response from the Leviathans, man. They needed that. I think they need presence in this early game in particular. Listen, you're not out of the woods against the Jade Dragons just for sticking with them in the early game, but that is the first of several checks that you must have the answer to if you have any hope of beating this team, is dealing with their oppressive early game. And so far, Leviathans keeping it close. It's still about 1,000 gold, though, in the Dragons' favor, so the Leviathans are responding, but not entirely keeping things even here at this point. More like 834 gold, about 1,000 experience. Still within reach, but a nice little start here for the Dragons.
They're in a good spot, and they've got a composition that should be well tooled to pull an early Gold Fury. They've got the pressure on purification beads that you look for. They've got the sustained DPS that you look for from someone like an On Her. Executioner now done for Panda Cat and his shell upgraded. That tells me that the Jade Dragons should be about ready to go on a Gold Fury if they see the opportunity. But you don't necessarily need to quite yet.
Like, is it 7,600 net worth here? I mean, he's almost 1,000 ahead of everyone else. A great pace here from Panda Cat with XC and upgraded shell done already. Great start to this for him. Aided a bit by Mike's work over in that long lane and early Sam gank as well. But that's who, if I'm the Leviathans, I don't really want to be around right now, is Panda Cat. I like them kind of looking for action in that mid 3v3, but they got to do something about this at some point, or he will just continue to get further and further ahead. He's already pushed Darko under tower more than once here, aggro. They need... I don't know what it is, though. We've seen a whole lot of teams try and deal with Panda Cat and it has not worked. If there is an answer,
yes,
I'm not so sure what it is.
Yeah, yet to find that one. Scientists still looking. They can't quite agree on how to stop the man, and for good reason, because he has been really strong so far this year. I think that the Jade Dragons at this point, you want to let Hurry back, get his second relic. You would probably like Sam to be able to get his beads up so that the dodgy pool isn't a death sentence for him. But with where we are in their builds, with how far ahead Panda is, taking a fight on his side of the map makes the most sense to me, and the easiest way to do that is to walk over and pull that Gold Fury.
It doesn't look like that's where they're at for now. They're kind of chilling in mid, and maybe, as you said, waiting on Sam to find a moment to find a reset. He's clearing out that right side jungle, and he is going to take that back here. That makes a ton of sense. Beads almost certainly going to be picked up for him, and likely a little bit more itemization into that third slot. So we can catch up on that itemization now. It's the tank boots into Sovereignty for Rongyu. Karen's for Shinto instead of this Ratatouille. We've seen a bit more of Charon's coin lately, but is that something you're picking up second slot? I mean, you got to get it early, but I mean, instead of Rod early on in the build?
Yeah, it feels a little bad because you're trading a lot of power for 10% penetration, but I find it very difficult to fit a 20% pen item in my build and feel good about it into the late game, because there comes a point where you just stop dealing damage to tanks and then you need to get that 20% pen option. And it's kind of like the anti-heal discussion that I always like to have. And it's, if you feel like you needed it, you're too late. You know, you need to get in ahead of the curve, and penetration is oftentimes the same way. It's definitely weaker overall early on, but I think it does make for a better curve in the build. And, you know, Charon's a lot cheaper these days. I don't mind it here for Shinto. He's already got 2 stacks on it. You know, it's not super important to stack that all the way, but you're not arguing with the extra movement speed and HP 5. I like the build that Shinto has gone so far. I do wish he would have gone Magus or Deso in that third slot. I don't love the Soul Gem in that slot. Flat pen in those first 3 items still feels really good to me.
Soul Gem a popular item right now, but I'm going to trust you. Mage builds are right in your Q zone, so should be able to rely on, I think, on that one. Let's take a look, though, at whether or not this Gold Fury is likely well warded by the Dragons on that left side of the map, so they certainly could start it up and be a bit ahead in terms of the information, and they are kind of cheating towards this left-hand side. Solo laners continuing to battle over there, so if something does happen, they likely won't be a part of it unless it's a real long, drawn-out fight. But Rongyu lurking and waiting on a moment, still doesn't have his second relic, and Mike does, and he loves to pick up Frenzy. He does that almost every game, but will he need it here? Leap right back out of trouble, though. It's actually Rongyu that looks worse for wear, thanks to Heroin, so no Gold Fury fight, just some scrapping here in mid. And worth noting that they had a bit of a relic engage to try, or advantage to start with the Dragons, but maybe Rongyu can find a back, and that won't come to fruition.
Yeah, Sam is just playing this one nice and patient. He's not there in the mid 3v3. He really hasn't been around the mid 3v3 a lot. Remember, he came in late to that fight around Mike, as Rongyu knows he's in trouble right away.
If Mike can lock him down, they get off to such a good start here on this Fury fight, and that's already good work to get him down low. And Mike engages again, moving him to brutalize, but it's Panatom's turn now, up onto the Powwow, and Sam, clearly the early target, does use the beads and avoids getting pulled, but he is now low and way less safe to something like a Pluck or Tycho Drums. Perhaps that will make them rethink whether or not they want this Gold Fury fight after all.
A little surprised, though. I mean, Gold Fury was getting low. The blink in from Panatom is smart, and immediately into the Powwow, doesn't waste any time. But I'm a little surprised that the Jade Dragons don't just take that and go back to the Gold Fury right away. I mean, yeah, Sam lost his beats, but you still had overall map control from that position.
Mike in again. Can't be knocked up in the middle of the brutalize, so he keeps it going as Rongyu attacks. And they are back onto the Fury, but all 5 here this time as Fine OK rotates in. Julio is nearby in mid, but Mike moves forward to zone. Fury low, Frenzy popped, and Fear No Evil confirms the Dragons the objective, and Rongyu ends up falling. Now it's the Ragnarok onto Julio, who tries to keep this fight going, and his damage is good. He's got Mike locked down, but the team in the back has been zoned out by great presence from Fine, as well as Sam, who makes his way in, and Shinto will fall to his pressure. It's a great fight from the Jade Dragons, and they send the Leviathans running.
And you find OK not done sending Yarkor quite yet. Aegis is still available for Yarkor, but holds on to it, gives Fine OK the respect, and pays the price. 3 for 0, Gold Fury in tow for the Jade Dragons. And I think that was a demonstration of the difference in experience level between the two solo laners. Fine OK gets in there, and he's gone for a very aggressive build. He goes for Stone of Gaia into Mystical Mail. That means that he is super squishy to Shinto at this point in his build. It is very easy for Shinto to all in him. But Fine does a really good job of waiting out that damage, juking some of it, making sure that those Taiko drums don't do too much to him, while putting out that damage with Sam for Soccer at the same time. Sam and Fine coordinate their dive really well, whereas Julio keeps some players busy, but focuses out Mike. Mike is never dying to just Julio's damage, and Panatom can't get in order to help him out, and makes it very easy for the Jade Dragons to immediately surge forward after dealing with Julio and sending him out of the fight. So that was just a better coordinated dive between Fine and Sam in comparison to Panatom and Sam and Fine versus Julio and Panatom. I talk for a living, by the way. And I think that it's really that shell for Panda Cat, which makes it really hard for Panatom to be aggressive without his ultimate available. And remember, he just used it to reset the Gold Fury before that. This dodgy pick makes it hard for him to full-on commit. You see it in the player damage. He's near the bottom.
He hasn't done much in this game here, has he? It's been mostly the solo laners, mid laner, and a little bit from Mike, who's been playing well too. That was really, really clean and a critical fight for the Dragons. Look at how this lead has exploded now. About 4,000 gold ahead, a little bit more than that as the Greater Scorpion on right goes down. Jade Dragons are ready to put another big objective on the map. And Julio, the target, he didn't have beads for another 30 seconds. They drop Fear No Evil as well. They want Julio absolutely dead and buried. Frenzy committed. Julio still alive. And now the Leviathans can re-engage after a heavy commitment from the Dragons. And Hurwind, the target in the back of the fight, onto the Palau goes Panatom, and Shinto puts Hurwind in a casket. Next target is Mike, but he leaps away over the wall. What a turnaround from the Chaos team when their boy was dead to rights. But Fine doing a great job in the middle of this fight, still keeping it going as Sam comes in to look for more action.
Oh, Panatom immediately met with an impale by Panda Cat. Stay off my boy. I've got his back. That shell right there on top of it. No chance to take down Sam for Soccer. And Final K is not allowed to get away with that, man. How is he in the midst of 4 people taking no damage? No one even wants to hit him. They don't want to, because then they'll think maybe he'll hit me back. Maybe if he just runs around and doesn't find me as the guy who's dealing the damage to him, I can get away with it. Great work by Julio. The build is in the perfect position in order to survive a play like that. An overcommit from the Jade Dragons for sure. And even though it ends up being a 1-for-1, doesn't that feel like more of a momentum play for the Jade Dragons? That they just looked so unkillable in that moment. Even though Julio looked really unkillable, who cares? All right, we won't kill that guy anymore. We'll just kill the rest of the team when they come in to help him.
Yeah, it felt like the exact opposite of that Gold Fury fight, which seemed so calculated. That almost felt like the Jade Dragons feeling themselves a little bit, looking for a rhythm play up against Julio. Not quite able to take him, but certainly proving that the Leviathans are going to have a hard time going into a full 5-on-5 now that they're down 5,600 gold or so at this point in the game. And what it really proved to me is exactly what your concern was 20.5 minutes ago, which is what is Panatom going to do in the late game up against this draft. Not as many shells as maybe you predicted, but that doesn't need to matter. They kind of efficiently just got 1 shell, and that's doing enough.
It's doing enough so far for sure. It's going to be difficult for him to make it work. I like the idea from the Jade Dragons. You called it a tempo, or a kind of a tempo play, and that's exactly the right way to think about it. I mean, you look at how that play kind of broke down around the Gold Fury. Jade Dragons get the Fury, get the tower. All of a sudden, they're really ahead in gold. And then as soon as the Leviathans catch their breath, if Julio ends up dying and now you're in a 5v4 because his beads were still down, you're in a bad spot.
Oh, good engage, though, from Rongyu. The beads from Hurwind are down, and that forces Mike into the ultimate, too. But Shinto used the Taiko drum, so a lot of what's traded there. But I think we might still give that advantage to the Leviathans. They lost a big ult, but beads down on Hurwind and Mike's ult down gives them some breathing room. How do you call that?
Yeah, I like the Leviathans coming out on top there because the Relic Dagger pickup from Rongyu. I think that means that he's going to have a significant window in between his Blink and Hurwind's Purification beads. Hurry now has to really respect Panatom's ultimate because he has to have time to jump and ult if he's not in that all-down 4 form anyways.
Wow, Rongyu kind of on a clinic right now, but he better not pay for it with his life as Mike comes in, cancels the Brutalize, and now Panatom engaging again hardcore. does get the Fear No Evil right in his face, trades out for the powwow, but in the backline, Fine OK and Mike are looking for the carries of the Leviathans. It's just Fine OK now as Mike's been pushed out, and he looks for Julio instead, who drops the beads in what seems like a losing effort. Sam claims his life, and even though, again, it looks like the Leviathans get off to a good start, they're a bit jumpy. I don't know if I love Panatom all-inning there.
Yeah, thinks that he got the beads out from Panda Cat, maybe. I mean, Heroine's got to be the target there. Panda did a good job of holding on to his purification beads and only used his ultimate whenever he got plucked by Rongyu, and that meant that he didn't have to respect that powwow whatsoever. Sam there, understanding that Sam's job is not really to go with Fine unless he needs to. So often we see that fight the other way around, where Sam is with Fine OK and Mike is back and peeling. But because of the shell pickup from Panda Cat, because Sam knows that he can get in there and disrupt what Panatom's going to do with his abilities, Mike dives with Fine OK, and Sam comes to peel. And when your team is working that well at removing parts and interchanging them across the team fight, you can't get this team getting their wires crossed if they're going to do things like that. That was impressive.
They come into this with a 7k gold lead, and the Fire Giant already well down below half. Rongyu here, in comes Yarkor, but what can they do? The Fire Giant in range, and the Dragons secure it, despite all that drama, but there are some low members in Mike at the back of the team fight, but it's still Fine OK engaging, forcing out Yarkor's relics, and winning the DPS race up against an ADC, but in comes Shinto to provide some damage, a little stim pack for his boy, but Fine OK repositions. Now it's Heroine's job to get involved, has to use the Aegis though, so he can retreat, but I think he might be stuck in the wrong part of town. Yarkor gets the kill, but in comes Sam with the Fear No Evil for a double. That turns the fight around on its head, and Yarkor too low. Sam finds a triple kill. The kid is nuts.
But he can't stay up forever. Eventually he goes down to Panatom. It takes a lot though, and Julio is in a lot of trouble. Sunder, Frenzy, see you later. Just Panatom up and standing against 3 members of the Jade Dragons with that Fire Giant buff. Hurry looks like he's hard inting there, that he dives in all by himself, but he bought so much time and did so much damage. That's a way I think you have to be playing Tiamat. You've got to be willing to get in there and get your hands dirty. Panda wants to end. I thought they were going to go for it. You can see Panda's body language that he's leading in. Come on, fellas, let's go.
He was kind of pushing up in the Phoenix,
Yeah, he wanted to, but someone yanks on the leash and pulls him back. Look, mid and left side Phoenix is still okay for how that fight turned out.
Yes. And listen, I don't think they're in a position to, like, lose a whole lot on their back, even if that Titan push doesn't go well. You don't want to maybe give Leviathans a way back in, but I think risk-reward, maybe they had a shot there. But nothing wrong at all with retreating there. They got a 13k advantage. It's been these 2 critical fights, maybe 3. The Gold Fury fight first, the Julio engage in right second, and then just now this battle where Heroine was willing to use the Tiamat mitigations aggressively to create a pseudo-third frontliner for this team, buy some time, and Sam sure used that window, didn't he? A triple kill for Sam for Soccer, further improving his already ludicrous KDA at this point in the game and making things look a whole lot better for the squad. I mean, the Dragons now in a really high win percentage position in this game, still have Fire Giant on 3. I wonder if that's enough for them to go push over in right. It looks like they are moving up, so the Leviathans might need to find a bit of a regroup here. Panatom way up alone there in the Bermuda Triangle.
And Mike is looking to maybe solo out Yarkor. He has animosity, so this is a fight that theoretically with Sunder, he might be able to win it.
I think Yarkor agrees. Just going to retreat from this fight. Lands near Hurrywind instead. And my man went from one evil to a much greater evil, it felt there, but he is back with the squad. Fine OK now in the middle, and they are putting out decent damage. At the Rage Transformation, they pluck Fine OK back into the squad. Meanwhile, Panatom winning the duel up against Sam for Soccer. This is such a huge kill if Panatom can find it, but so far proving elusive, and Fine OK winning the battle back up against the Leviathans. Yarkor already put down, and so much of the DPS for the Leviathans already lost, so Fine OK keeps up the aggression. Whirlwind able to find Julio, and Shinto just running for his life. If Panatom had a chance to get Sam, that window has closed. He's got to come back to the boys and help out because they're in danger of losing the game. Shinto been removed, and it's 5 of the Dragons with a chance to take this game away from the Leviathans. The Titan down to half, and no one here to defend. 26 minutes and 35 seconds, and the Dragons win game 1.
I don't know what you do against the Jade Dragons because Fine OK looks like he looks like he's hacking, dude. I don't get it. The man does not take any damage. Cucullin's with that same build in the same levels and everything the same will take more damage and deal less unless your name's Alfonso, I guess. I don't know. The man's possessed. He created infinite space in that game. And the way that the Jade Dragons were just so flexible in those team fights. Every team fight was a different configuration except for one consistent piece. And that was Fine OK all the way in the back line and not dying doing it.
Yeah, these Jade Dragons are modular, aren't they? They can shift and realign these pieces in a way that I don't know that we've ever seen a team do on the fly in these team fights like this. And listen, the Leviathans gave them a good run for their money, but that just was not enough. And listen, if you want to be a little bit more like Fine OK at home, and why wouldn't you want to be, maybe pick up his jersey. Thank you out to Insight Apparel for hooking us up, getting us these jerseys out here, and you too can be a part of the modular Dragons. Check out at Cloutamus, who has picked up one himself and rocking the bunny ears. You can find your own look at Insight.
Yeah, maybe it's not the name is Alfonso. Maybe it's the Jade Dragons jersey, courtesy of Insight, that's making Fine OK deal more damage and take less damage. Now, I'm not saying for sure, but I'm saying we can't rule it out. So maybe test it.
Yeah, do a little bit of that science at home, right? Change one of the variables, and that variable is having that jersey on your own site, shop.smiteproleague.com, and you can try and pick one of those up for yourself. Aggro, the Dragons looking like a team that's going to be really, really tough to beat. The Leviathans gave them a run for their money in the early game, but that Gold Fury fight in particular really broke down any chance they had of kind of getting closer in that mid-game. So we'll see if the Leviathans can find an answer back. Quick break. They'll be right back with the breakdown.
Hey there, Smite fans, Aggro here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. An AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
That's a lot of cores.
Plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true.
I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
What's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240Hz monitors.
Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality.
We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible SMITE experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's at Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com.
And you're telling me an alien wore this?
I mean, that all sounds good to me. Good luck finding a 3090 anywhere nowadays. Thanks once again to Alienware for sponsoring Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. Make sure to check them out at Alienware on Twitter and Instagram. Don't know why I emphasized it that way. And then alienwarearena.com for giveaways and a whole lot more. And then, hey, use code SMITEAW for discounts on all that good gear that you're now going to go load up on. Mifflin joins me, though, to break down game number 1 here, Mifflin. Slow start, right? I mean, there was first blood, things slowed down for a little while there, and then it just felt like the Dragons kind of pulled the Leviathans into their own game plan, into their own speed there towards the end. And then in 25 minutes, we would not end up reaching the late game.
Yeah, I mean, towards the end, I'd say, 17 minutes in was exactly where the pace got established right here. This Gold Fury fight, this one goes the way of the Jade Dragons, and then the Leviathans walk in a little bit late. Rongyu caught slacking, dies, and then 2 more people die on the tail end of it, also resulting in a tower loss. I was back there in the virtual green room hanging out with all your favorite guys who aren't on cast right now. And we said that was going to be a game-changing fight, and it was. Yeah, well, I didn't want to name-drop Hindu because when I do, people say that I'm just like clout-chasing or whatever. But yeah, I was hanging out with Hindu, man. I call him Graham because we're friends.
Right, but not me, right? You're not clout-chasing when you drop my name, those sorts of things. Got it. Thanks, man. Look, Sanford Soccer in this game, I think, had some decent fear no evils. Him and Panatom were kind of going 1v1 against one another a whole lot, but we got to talk about Final K as well. My man was an unkillable machine throughout the large part of that game. I mean, the direction that build went on the Cucullin, definitely no surprise that it was so hard to take him down, and they didn't. The Leviathans didn't take him down. 304 for Final K at the end of game number 1. Panda Cat undying as well. The On-Her looks near flawless. Look, it was a slower game from Hurrywind, right? But it was it was a faster game from literally everyone else on the Jade Dragon. Still second to top damage in the game from Hurrywind on this Tiamat. But yeah, 23,000 damage for Final K on this Cucullin is going to be a tough hurdle to leap over if you're the Leviathans.
Look, Aggro said it about Julio. He looked unkillable as well, but the difference was Julio looked unkillable with his tail tucked, running away from the brute force of the Jade Dragons. FidoK looked unkillable, holding W key into a storm 1 versus 4, didn't care about what was happening around him, and dealing immense damage at the exact same time. Look, they were joking about it on the cast, saying that maybe potentially we need to look into FidoK's stats or the items he's building, or maybe his just game cache, because it looks like Mans is hacking out there. That's how tanky he is. Look, I think it's just this guy. His positioning is better. He chooses his times just better. FidoK is in contention for me for just the greatest of all time title.
PBM now has 16 more assists than anyone else in the league, with the same amount or less games played than everyone else in the league. 85 assists now for PBM through 7 games. And remember, 7 picks through 7 games for Polar Bear Mike as well. So now it's bounce back time for the Atlantis Leviathans here, Mifflin. It's a team that was able to kind of hang in there in that early game, and we've talked about how that game got a bit out of their reach as time went on. Do you see that as something that can be addressed in picks and bans, or is it more of a mindset type thing? Because we know this is the team in the Leviathans that likes to pick kind of structured along with their play styles. What it is, they like to move on to the late game and team fight. They've shown us that they can compete in the early game, so it's not all just late game team fighting for these guys anymore. But if you're going to adjust to this Jade Dragons game plan, is that something you can do in picks and bans, or do you need to do that in game?
I think that you can adjust in P's and B's a little bit. If we're just talking about the Game 1 draft, I would love to see the Leviathans trade out Daji for just about any other assassin right now. Aggro already highlighted it perfectly throughout the cast how strong Shell is into that god in its current state. Maybe a couple weeks from now, once that Shell nerf comes through, we'll see a little bit more Daji, but outside of that, I don't think that she really has a home in the meta right now. I think that the Leviathans really need to address the play on field in that mid-game phase, around 15-minute mark. That's where the Jade Dragons are at their absolute strongest. I think that the Leviathans would have been better suited around a couple of those gold free fights with just cutting their losses, backing up, and playing to their own strength, which is the late game. 25, 30 minutes. Instead, it felt like, and as you already highlighted, Dave, the Leviathans get sucked into the Jade Dragons' pace, kind of stepping in toe to the tune of their own dance instead of playing their own game. If the Leviathans could just clean it up a little bit, wait it out, play that slower style, I think that's really where they're going to be finding fruition.
Well, a god that feels okay at doing that into the late game is this Sobek here. Feels great. The tankier you get as the game goes on. Worth noting, Giannis banned out yet again on her Guan Yu to follow, so it's going to have to be something different here for Panda Cat. Same for Hurrywin down to mid, as Tiamat taken away from him. Ymir also banned out as well as the set. But Sobek first pick here for the Leviathans, Mifflin. That'll provide some good setup for Rongyu there, but maybe more importantly now. Yeah, double Cupid. No, there's at least one Cupid locked in for Panda Cat over on the Jade Dragons. It is certainly not 2 Cupids, but let's take it for what it is. At least 1 Cupid locked in here, Mifflin, as well as 2, 3, and now 4. It's the game of love is what we're looking at. I can see a few of the picks and bans. One of those Cupid picks is correct here, Mifflin. What do you think about Panda Cat going to Cupid here in Game 2?
If it's that aggressive playstyle, sorry to the chat, we are working to get that fixed. A slight issue with the P's and B's. Clearly, we're not playing on the MOTD here today. But Cupid, I think, is going to fit the style of the Dragons pretty well. They like that early game aggression. They want to play a kill pressure lane. Cupid's going to fit that perfectly. And if they do somehow get dragged into a later game pace, if they have to match what the Leviathans are trying to bring, healing around teamfight or healing around late game team fights around these neutral objectives can't ever be overlooked. That Cupid heal 300-400 in the late game per drop, plus it's for free. It restores your own mana. I think that's going to be very potent.
That sure looks good. How about the Sobek first pick here for Rongyu? PBM said what? Sobek, Ymir, and Yamoja were the 3 that they had their eyes on. Yamoja, left unpicked, unbanned, so that leaves Sobek on the table. Athena as well. We can talk on that in a minute if we still see Athena go by the wayside. But Sobek first overall, does that still hold some weight for you?
I think that it's just a smart first pick. There's no true counter pick to Sobek. He's got fantastic engage as well as backline peel with that tail whip. The ultimate is great for securing not only kills but also objectives if you need to, almost as if it's a mobile Ymir ult. Essentially is a mobile Ymir ult. Has CC immunity, slows people in the radius, and does big burst damage. But I think that they've really lined themselves up here, the Leviathans that is, to get a strong +2, +3, the top 3 for them. I really do think that they can maybe prioritize finding a jungler for Panatom. I'm really excited to see where they go with it.
And let me ask you this on the other side with PBM here, and Sam for Soccer maybe even comes to this conversation as well. Now through 7 games, 7 different picks, and they're the updated picks on your screen. So it's Heimdall first pick. Still stands, though, our points about the Sobek, getting that into the hands of Rongyu. But Heimdall, Wheelik, Sobek, 1 through 3 now for the Leviathans. King Arthur, Scylla, Cupid over there for the Jade Dragons. So Myth, we can kind of catch back up here where both of these picks and bans stand for these two teams. Giving Fine OK King Arthur and Hurrywin back to the Scylla. Scary, I think, if you're the Leviathans, unless you have a good answer for it.
I mean, Hurrywin called it out. He thinks Scylla is his best pick, air quotes. That's why people aren't banning out the Yanis. I'm pretty sure he's just lying to the camera through his teeth at that point. But I think that his Scylla certainly is strong. King Arthur, we saw the value of that pick from Julio last time. I'm sure that the Fine OK is going to be able to find similar strength. But I want to talk about this top 3 from the Leviathans. They pick up a much safer ADC inside a Heimdall, can play very far back, doesn't really have to fight into Panic Hat just about ever. So I think that's going to be fitting to the style that the Leviathans are looking for to group up around that late game team fight. And they've just got fantastic setup for this Wheelish Tail Whip. Blink in Tail Whip, that's a Gravity Surge. Get a Pluck, that's a Gravity Surge. Anything you need, it should be good. Even Kakullen can set up for it as well. Leviathans aren't going to have to work too hard to set up for this Wheelish ultimate.
Yeah, Kakullen Discordia is how the Leviathans finish things off here. Look, Discordia in and out of picks and bans here over the first few weeks. Hasn't been the most popular, hasn't been the least popular. Is that a nice way for the Leviathans to finish off their draft?
Point of correction here, Dave. It's actually going to be a Merlin lock-in for the Leviathans here. And it is lacking a little bit insofar as burst damage, especially considering how their setup is built around it. Heimdall ultimate is a little bit interesting. You pull them in with the Niflheim, and then they land into what? Ice Storm, Flames of the Merlin. It's not that burst potential that you'd expect from the hard CC core that the Leviathans have, as well as that Sobek. But it does certainly fit that objective-based style.
Leviathans changed their draft, and they want to change the outcome. Game number 2 starts right now.
Some nice looks here for the Leviathans and the Dragons. It is the Merlin here in Shinto's hands in this middle lane, an objective-focused mid-pick, something that you've described, Aggro, as maybe missing a bit of beginning and end to his arc. We'll see what it does in Shinto's hands. I'm excited for Panatom on this Wheelish, though, an early game force that can punish some of these leaps. Not a ton out there for the Dragons, but a knock-up shows up, and they're in position to find some nice kills.
And look, I mean, the Sobek-Willish combo is one that goes back many, many years. That's an old Eager special. Aurora used to run that quite a bit with DJ Pernicus. I mean, it was
right, Fern.
It was solid back then. It's going to be solid now. You don't have a whole lot of leaps, but that's not going to stop Panatom for going for Heroin right away. Blink in, no hesitation. Say goodbye to 60% of your health bar. Love it.
How does Herwin not use beads there, though? Good recognition from him that I don't think it would have changed much in that equation, right? So just getting out of there the way that he could. And Panicat also has his beads forced out. That must have been Rongyu early on in this process. Good pressure from the Leviathans. This feels like an about face from them, doesn't it? Coming in and saying, we're the ones looking for some early pressure this time to help us get to our strong late game.
Well, Panatom's not a jungler that can do that much more effectively pre-5 than he could last game on the Dodgy. That Dodgy pick did end up being a little bit weak, but check this out. Sam going for an early gank.
But Julio leaping out of the way. Stun connects. Does he have the poke? There's so much available, but it isn't enough. Julio might even be slightly healthier than Fine OK despite all of that gank presence. So lots of action early, but the subjects of that action have not overreacted. They've calmly avoided it. Hurrowend getting away from Panatom, Julio getting away from Sam, but it's an action-heavy first 2 minutes, despite the fact there are no kills on the board. Let's take a breather here and assess some of these starters. Panatom, again, going for this Eye of the Jungle on a Wheelish, bit of an auto-attack starter. It's Conduit versus Sands of Time in the mid, Sentinels versus Benevolence. Some different selections here for these players in the same role.
I mean, Bumba's Hammer getting nerfed, clearly a big deal. You're going to go on someone like Tsukiyomi. It's Bumba's Hammer, his best item by far. Think you still want it on that god no matter what. Not going for it on the Willish is a little bit surprising to me, though. I mean,
Agreed.
She uses those in-hand cancels so well. It's a hi-rez Lament type of god. Normally on those types of gods, you're doubling down on that with the Bumbas. And adding in 80 extra true damage to your late game combo is actually pretty important, because a lot of times a Willish ends up being just shy in the damage department, I think, of her all-in combo late game. 80 damage, you know, we're talking some pretty decent items, or some pretty decent damage added in. So I'm a little surprised to see Panatom go for that Eye of the Jungle instead. We'll see how well he's able to leverage it come late game. I mean, that Protector does, you know, getting percent power and percent protections helps out in those hybrid builds, because you end up getting a lot of both. And that's the direction Panatom went last game with a little Void Shield. Wouldn't be surprised to see him do it again.
And it is those hybrid builds that got hit, right? Keeley, Shifters, Bumba's Hammer were the ones that all got affected in this bonus balance that went out. The pen and the cooldown taken off there. Bumba's, not entirely the cooldown, but half of that. Shifters coming down a bit, as well as on Keeley with the power and price. We'll see if that continues to affect these builds, or if they'll find some new way. As Rongyu consumes the blink, but he's got Panatom nearby, and that's enough for first blood. Rongyu gets it, maybe in that spot. Let your jungler get that last hit, but I don't think it matters a whole lot. Just catching Panda Cat out and getting the beads, that's pretty big. Should be another kill for him if they can come over there.
Yeah, pretty big mistake there by Panda to use the beads, number one, to path the way he did, number two, and to dash into the wall. Maybe should have been number one on that list, I suppose. But a couple of rare mistakes from Panda Cat lead to that kill. And look at this, immediately straight waiting for him out of base. But Panda, he's a streamer, he's used to it.
He's already dashed, though. I think that might just be the end of this one, and it indeed is. Panatom just going to leave on Suku, as in comes Whirlwind and in comes Sam for Soccer. They do want blood in exchange for blood, but they sure did give him the streamer special there, didn't he? Panda Cat looked ready for it, but they were waiting for him in between the Tier 1 and Tier 2. Not quite as toxic as the in-between Tier 2 and Phoenix I've sometimes seen, but still pretty frustrating for the ADC.
Listen, I mean, you go from pretty different games now for Panda Cat, where he got first blood in game number 1, was untouched basically throughout the entire game, finished without a death on the scoreboard. Now he is really behind on this Cupid, and Heimdall's a god that can feel really oppressive when he's ahead. If your beads are down, like they still are for Panda Cat, your core can play up on you, and if you get hit by that through the realms, you're likely just dead. So this is not a good position to be in for Panda, to say the least. I wonder if Mike is going to have to come over and hold his hand for the next minute or so in order to make sure that he doesn't get punished yet again.
And you said that Heimdall is a character that can get aggressive, well, Yarkor is a player that can get aggressive as well. There's the Salmon Leap, but will it be enough under the tower? The answer is yes. Julio, living through 2 early ganks with actually 0 help, is pretty clutch for the Leviathans. I think that's hard to overstate. Plus, he can relay to the team that Sam's ultimate and beads are down. He actually forced Sam's beads on the back of that too. Julio doing work from the solo just by staying alive.
Yeah, that's huge. And now you know Sam can't really gank duo lane. Panda's just not far enough ahead to really help him. Now the right-hand side, that's 2 failed ganks. No pen quite yet for Sam, so he can get stronger from this position, but it looks like it's not Sam that's likely to gank the solo lane. It might be the Leviathans. They're grouped and ready to go on this right-hand side of the map.
I wonder if they have the information. They're going to use the presence in right to get the greater scorpion, but they have to be careful. The dragons are here in force. There's the pull. Sam is going to fall. I'm a Monster does seem to connect his Panatom's low, and he has got to find a route to maneuver because the boys are here in force. Stun from Fino. K nets him his first kill of the game by cutting down the enemy jungler. It's jungle for jungle, but Panatom got the kill first, then died, and Sam really got nothing. How do you call that one, Aggro?
I like it still for the Leviathans, just based on the pressure that they've gotten, but it's still pretty even, I think, on the back end of that. I just like the mentality here for the Atlantis Leviathans. Rongyu is everywhere right now. He's been a part of all 3 kills so far for them, 1, 0, and 2. It's just been Panatom and Rongyu walking around. Who can we knock up into kill for free? This guy or this guy? All right, it's this guy this time. You know, we'll kill Panda Cat with it. Now we're going to walk over to the right-hand side as soon as Gravity Surge is back up. We're going to kill Sam for Soccer. And just simplifying the game. It's a 2-man game right now for the Leviathans, and the combo is easy. Let's just execute on it, and they're doing it really well.
And I know Julio is behind over here in solo. He just turned level 9 to catch up to Fine OK, but I think it's pretty impressive that he's even where he is. Look at the net worth charts. He is still a good deal behind, about 200 gold show. That's really not that crazy. Julio's done a good job despite all this pressure as Panatom forced to give up the Greater Scorpion when Sam shows up. I believe Leviathans got a red buff invade last time as well. So they're in a pretty good spot, and it helps them that their solo laner has really stood tall against all this pressure on right, and they've got long lane pressure thanks to those 2 kills they got onto Panda Cat back-to-back. A much, much better look for the Leviathans here in the early game, but can they hold on to it when the Dragons are such experts at this point in the game? They're going to need to keep finding this pressure.
I mean, this is the best way to do it. It's not to turtle up and hope that they don't beat you. I think it's to match that pressure with these invades and right back to it as soon as this gravity surge is back up. But this is the hardest one for them to execute on of the group so far because everyone's beads are up. Both times the combo has worked, it's because beads are down. So instead of trying to pick the fight, they go to the objective instead. Love it.
And switch to this flame stance in Merlin. That's what burns through the objectives. No one on the Dragons any the wiser. And if they are not coming over to contest. A great heads-up call from the Leviathans to switch over to the Fury, steal that one away. Not even steal, but take it uncontested. A huge play from this, and we had to hope that if any team could give this Dragons team a run for their money, it would be the Leviathans, it would be Old Sanguine, the LatAm Hope. And for the first 9 minutes here in Game 2, and even a good contest for a while in Game 1, they've done it. But they have to keep finding ways to do this. It's still not enough just yet, which is crazy to say.
Not quite, but they're in a good position. I mean, Shinto is now up about a level and a half over Hurwind. He's been the beneficiary of just not having to worry about the farm that he can solo because Rongyu and Panatom are just 2-man roaming throughout the Jade Dragon's jungle so often this game. Now you can get to that mid-game where I think Merlin is at his strongest a little bit more quickly and keep Hurwind a little bit more behind, though Hurry has at least finished off his flat pen item in that Spear of Desolation. So Hurry's going to feel like he's dealing plenty of damage already.
Certainly should be. The Karen's Conduit and cooldown boots already there in his back pocket. Been making Merlin look good. We've seen a little bit more of this Merlin pick lately. I wonder if you're going to be banning some of those other picks, if that's the call, as there's some action in mid and Hurwin respects the aggression from Leviathans and the ultimate from Panatom. That is the beads down on Hurwin, but Panatom's ult, it looks like down. No blinks used, but it looks like Rongyu used his in trade for getting those beads out from Hurry. He's vulnerable, but it'll be a little while before they can come back and collect on that small investment.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's fine. That's a fine trade for the Leviathans. You use the ultimate, don't get the pull, but at least now you've set yourself up for another one. No cooldown quite yet for Panatom. He's gone for Crusher, so it does mean that combo is going to take a little bit longer to come back up and be ready to go. Still plenty of time in comparison to the Purification beads, but with how they've played this game, I almost wonder if going for that Jotuns just to get this, just keep this snowball rolling and using that combo would have been a little bit better.
I don't know about this, Rongyu. You're a little alone. Pyromancer in the sights of dragons, and yes, Rongyu forced into that lurking in the waters. It's a safety tool for him. He seemed okay trading, and it actually works out. The Pyromancer ends up dropped, so I'm sure he is indeed happy with it. And now they go to the red buff for the invade. Stay here, Panatom. It's coming up. And they make it to the red buff first. Mike and Hurwind are nearby, yes, but they have nothing to say as a second red buff gets stripped away by the Order side team. I like how flexible they've been in terms of where their pressure comes from. It doesn't always have to be from the same source. They'll take what's there when they can.
Exactly. They're responding to what the Jade Dragons are doing, which is a mistake that I think some teams make when they're trying to just all-out pressure. You know, a team will rotate their solo laner over, and they'll be like, well, we got to pressure
We're
anyways.
purple this game, right? Yeah, we got to do that.
Yeah, that's the game plan, so we got to stick to it, but been much more flexible than that so far for the Leviathans. I think it's been very good. I do wonder about the Jade Dragon strategy of just letting Sam try and keep up and farm elsewhere. He's kind of stopped ganking since that second gank didn't go well for him on this right-hand side, and instead just resigned himself to trying to keep up with Panatom in the jungle. And with only 2 kills and an assist alongside that farm, Panatom is up about 300 gold, but you'd think that gap would likely be bigger with how many invades he's getting off and those kills and assists underneath his belt. Sam's actually ahead in XP, So that's the strategy that Jade Dragons are going for here. They're waiting a little bit longer than I think that most teams would in this position, and trying to play it a little bit more safe than many people would expect a team like the Dragons to play it.
This is our first time, though, getting to see how the Dragons choose to respond to just about anything. They've been kind of the aggressors all season long, so it is nice to see what their strat is. They kind of sent PandaCat out in an escape pod, though, didn't they? They're not heading back over there. They're kind of letting him handle that long lane for himself, and he has stayed about a level and a half behind as Wrongyu and Panatom blink. There's the ult. Herwin pulled in, but Panatom, the one low, the one hit by a monster. But they do get Herwin in the end. Jungle traded for mid, but now Wrongyu stuck alone. Ultimate committed here from Sam as he keeps up the aggression. Tail Whip buys a moment, but Wrongyu just left. No one can come to help, and he'll fall. Good damage, though, from Shinto, and maybe Julio can clean up, and he does. Sam goes down. Jungle for mid, traded for jungle support.
And the relic situation on the Jade Dragons is looking barren after that fight. I mean, both relics used by Hurry, beads used by Sam for soccer. Shinto got so much damage off in that fight. He was really contributing and letting Julio come in and clean up those fights on the back end. Really good play by Panatom. A little bit of an unfortunate situation there for Herwind when you leap, or in Scylla's case, go underground and end up on the other side. Once you start to get pulled back, if you're underneath that geometry, you're going to go to where he is no matter what. Now, I don't know if Hurry took the damage necessarily and got stunned, but he was a little late on those purification beads. You have to pre-beads in that situation and assume that Panatom's going to use that ultimate, because once you end up underneath, you've got to get yanked back to the closest valid location, and that's what ended up happening there. So it ended up working out well for the Leviathans.
Kind of like Baba Yaga, right? When you're going into that slow leap, you're beadsing ahead of time so that can get off. Didn't work out for him there. Primal Fury goes to Leviathans. They took it on the back of that fight. So it looks like Dragons will answer with the Pyromancer. That gives them a little bit of gold needed to close this gap. And they've kept it from getting too far out of control. It's still right around that 2,000 mark. But hasn't it resulted in permanent seeming leads for the backline? Shinto and Yarkor have really never had to think about how far ahead they are of their counterparts. They've been ahead the whole time. Panatom has kind of had to trade his lead a bit to get his carries ahead. Now it's time for Shinto and Yarkor, I think, to start coming out and putting that lead to work for this team, because that's what the Leviathans have traded their early game for.
Feels exactly like what they did last season during Phase 1, where they were at their most successful. It's Shinto and the ADC, then Netroid, now Yarkor, getting these leads, Panatom and Wrongyu goon squatting through the jungle together, and just making people uncomfortable and playing on that right side of the map a little bit more, or on enemy buffs, and just letting their backline go to work in the late game.
PandaCat the target again as Panatom comes in. Fields of Love drop, but Panatom uses the beads to keep up the pressure, and Shinto over the wall gets the kill credit. That is double relic from Panatom as well, so PandaCat forced a good trade. But I think we're seeing the beginnings of trouble for Panatom. Double shell for the backline, Herwin and PandaCat. He's going to need a way to fight through that later on, as Mike goes all in on this fight, drops the ultimate and the Sunder, and Wrongyu just dodges all of it. Perfectly played, and that's kind of a gift from Mike. A lot of his cooldowns expended there.
Blink, ult, and the Sunder, as you mentioned, and he was trying to just get them off the tower, but maybe letting them get that tower was the better idea. You know, let them overcommit their time a little bit, because he only needed a couple more seconds for Hurry and Sam to get there. Yeah.
But now the backup is on the side of Leviathans. I like the idea from Fine OK, looking for a stun. Can he prove elusive again? He cannot. He goes down to the gank on the right side from the Leviathans, and now it's their pace. Now the Dragons have to respond to the Leviathans' calls as they spread out this map, increase their lead to 3,200 in gold, 4,400 in experience. We asked the Leviathans to show us that they can handle the Dragons, and it's not done yet, but it's been a good start. And Aggro, how do you like this call? They're going for fire.
It's a little bit risky. Scylla has the best secure on the map, and she's got her relics up and is local. This is going to be close.
This is a huge play. Can the Leviathans leverage their lead, or will the Dragons force their way back in? Wrongyu on to Sam to force him out. The fire still leashed. And Herwin up in the I'm a Monster. He's getting close for the steal, and there is no way for them to burn it. The Fire Giant doesn't go down, and the Dragons steal it away at the last final minute. But Julio does get the kill onto Sam, but what a play from the Dragons to at least get the objective.
And it's Polar Bear Mike who does it to him. The crushing earth, the Terra 2 is the thing that steals away that Fire Giant. And the idea is good there from the Leviathans. They understand that Scylla's there and has the best secure on the map. So that was, by design, a fight, but the carries took too long to get off the Fire Giant. Yarkor and Shito maybe not quite as comfortable quite yet as that backline pairing. The tanks got off the FG. Yarkor in particular stayed on it a little bit longer, and that lets it get to that low HP threshold. I think it's an okay idea to fight in that position. I think it's okay to pull the Jade Dragons in. You got Heroine's ultimate, but when the fire gets that low and then Heroine drops the ultimate in and still fire doesn't get reset, now you're in a really bad position and you end up trading 1 for nothing and a Fire Giant steal. The carries, you can see them on the map there, still on fire. They've got to get out of that pit a little bit earlier. They just can't stick around quite that long.
And you see the tanks on the tail end kind of realize that, right, of Wrong You and Yarkor. They try to come back in because someone's got to now confirm it that isn't the Dragons, and it ends up going the way of them. I think that you've got a perfect read on that one, and it looked like the front line, back line of Leviathans, despite how well they've played, got a little lost in that. I don't know if that's the way that their typical late-game fights would go. That was kind of a bit of a different situation than Leviathans are normally in, but maybe just a little bit of fumbling the bag there. Still in the lead, but nothing like what it could have been if they had been the ones that gotten the Fire Giant there and a couple of kills on top of it. They're going to have to show us they can still hold on to what has now become a bit of a smaller lead that we're 19 minutes into the game.
Well, they're not giving up the pressure. They're the ones still surging forward into the enemy side of the map. A little surprising to me. I think that the Jade Dragons should be pretty happy to take this engagement because Panda's only a level down. He's got both his relics. He's at the same point in his item build as Yarkor.
Well, this Oni Fury could be a nice little win here for the Leviathans. They get it, but in comes Fine OK and Wrong You. Mike just had to be the sacrificial lamb. He avoids the Ama Monster, but they commit Fields of Love as well, and still Wrong You lives, but Yarkor, or Julio, excuse me, makes his way in. He's the one in trouble, but makes his way back out. But a lot committed. I wonder if the Dragons just going to kind of call this here of the Leviathan, say, I know you got to reset, and just head to fire. That seems to be Sam's play, but the rest of the team just going right to the Tier 1. They've got a window while the Leviathans have to back.
Yeah, Pyromancer should be pretty free. Yeah, they've got the fire still. They got it on the 3 members. It's Pyromancer that they're heading towards and will get successfully. This is where the Oni Fury isn't as big of a deal. That of the Furies that the Jade Dragons could have lost in that moment, that's probably the best one because they still have all 5 members up. It's not like the Leviathans can use the Oni Wave pressure in order to establish Fire Giant positioning because Fire Giant is still down. You would have liked to get that if you're the Jade Dragons. I think they were a little slow to get to that objective. I think they should have been more willing to take that engagement than they ended up being. Maybe a little bit worried about the starter item upgrades that could be coming through on the other side, but they hadn't come through yet. Now at this position, it's time to spread out and farm and get your carries to match those upgrades. Now you don't want to fight anymore if you're the Dragons, even with that Fire Giant, because you're at a more significant item disadvantage than you were before that Gold Fury.
And look at the decision-making by Leviathans. Yarkor doesn't pick up that hidden dagger the way Panicat does. He upgrades the starter because he's already level 20. The upgraded Archmage's gem there for Shinto, and a little bit into his final item there for him as well. So those are big power spikes they're hitting. They can't quite get protected the jungle because Panatom's so far behind in XP. You pointed that out 7 minutes ago, and it looks like it's still the case at this point. But some big power spikes are their carries, who I think still need to cash that early game check that Panatom and Wrong You wrote for them, right? I mean, they were meant to have a big advantage, and we haven't quite seen them leverage it still.
And look at what Yarkor's game has really been. Remember, he had a 2-level lead, a level and a half lead over Pandacat. And Panda, but he wasn't involved in either of those kills onto Panda. So now he's in but he got to level 6, Panda's level 4. Surely he could have done a better job of pushing that lead, and I can tell because if you take a look at the player damage, if Doug can bring that up, Yarkor is all the way at the bottom. Maybe he zoned him off some waves, but probably not. I mean, there was a moment where Panda came back at level 4 with no beads. Yarkor has ultimate up. Surely he could have zoned him from that wave and tried to set up a kill on that wave. And that's where maybe that inexperience comes in. Now, we didn't ride along on that dual lane the whole time. I'd have to go back and watch the replay. Maybe Panda was just so passive and played it so perfectly that he gave up the minimal amount of farm and took no damage doing so. But that seems a little, I'm probably going to lean the other way and think that maybe Yarkor could have pushed that lead better.
Rongyu and Mike trade blink for blink to start this fight off, and Rongyu has to give up his ultimate. I think Mike dropped his ultimate too, so the supports trade their engage at the start of that fight, but neither one of them get a whole lot from the other team in trade. Looks like Rongyu and Julio, though, going to take a back in this spot. No teleports. It's blink beads for the solo laners. That's become kind of normal nowadays. No one really picking up teleport all that often. So they'll be walking back in the hard way with Julio having reset, but Rongyu still took a little bit of poke in that trade, so not a whole lot gained for him. This next Fire Giant, huge. Do the Leviathans really even have a big advantage, though, coming into this fight? Doesn't really feel like they're in that big of an advantage state, maybe a little bit, with a full item finish for Julio and Final K on a bridge item there, working on the Pridwin.
The big deal is that both tanks for the Leviathans have spectral armor, and neither tank has it for the Jade Dragons. I'm shocked to see that Final K has not gone for a spectral in this game. I think Yarkor should be able to eat him up pretty quickly. Mike's build makes more sense to me in that Lotus Crown is so good on Terra's ultimate that you kind of want that no matter what. Pridwin also so good in that moment. But Jade Dragons might have been caught a little bit too much. Remember, they have the burn, not the secure.
That's right, and the Leviathans do have the objective burning. Herwin on the way with I'm a monster, and he steals it away. Leviathans had no one there to keep Herwin out, so they take the fight on the back end. But I think Sam ready to re-engage. Panatom goes down first. Shinto grabbed by Final K and looking to reposition, but he needs a bit of backup, and Herwin has removed Yarkor. No, it's disaster for Leviathans. At the very least, they do get rid of Panda Cat, but Shinto explodes underneath the damage from Mike's ultimate, and that is a 3-for-1 plus FG in favor of the Dragons. The game just changed in an instant.
I think they might have been able to end if Yarkor hadn't killed Panda Cat, and the deal is they might still be able to end this game effectively. With Sam chasing out Rongyu, likely not. That's going to prevent them from ending the game because they just don't have good tower DPS, but Rongyu should eventually fall on this chase from Sam. I don't know if they're going to be able to even get a Phoenix, though, here, Finch. They just don't have the objective damage to do so.
No, not without Panda Cat and not with Rongyu keeping Sam busy. They're just kind of hanging out in the back there. I appreciate the friendliness from Sam, but you want to rejoin the squad ASAP here on this one. But as you said, they've kind of pulled off of the actual base sieging that we thought they would do. Here's a look, though, at Herwin's coming up. And Agro, I don't think he's going to see a whole lot of resistance on the way.
No, Julio just is far too close to the Fire Giant. He blinks in and barbed spears them. I mean, that's not stopping us still in the middle of her ultimate. That zone has got to be better established there for the Leviathans. But the call is to burn and try and get it whenever Jade Dragons were likely backing. So maybe the zone isn't the right call at all. You have to accept that if he gets close, we've lost it. Maybe as little as it's my least favorite thing in ranks. Watching solo laners hitting Fire Giants makes me want to just lose it. Your DPS is near zero. Keep them out. But if the call is, if he's here, we lose it anyways, maybe we just need to dump every DPS we have into this Fire Giant and try and get out. Either the zone's got to be better or the DPS has got to be better. Leviathans were somewhere in the middle, and they lost it because of it.
And they seemed a bit lost on the post objective too, didn't they? I would think that if the call is DPS and we just give up the objective if it's there, then you've got to at least be poised for a post-objective fight, at least a little better than that, but they were disjointed on that as well. Panatom got blown up almost instantly in that engagement. He's got nothing by way of extended survivability except for the CC immunity, and that didn't come up big for him in that engagement. Now the Dragons aggro in an excellent position. Suddenly they're 6k gold in the lead, and still 1,500 gold to collect from that tier 2 tower in solo lane. So things looking a bit scary for the Leviathans just like that. How do you like their base defense, though, since that's where they're about to be? Merlin, pretty good in that moment, I'd think.
Very good in that moment. Definitely one of the best. Not the best engaged, though, from Rongyu. Blink auto. He blinks in and goes, oh, not you. Not PBM. That one's not going to work for me. So he ends up not doing it. It is going to be kind of hard for the Jade Dragons to initiate these fights, unless Mike does that.
Unless Mike makes his way instantly fine. Okay, just walks in from the back and says, I'll take my pick, and it's Yarkor who does end up having to give up the beads. I'm a Monster connects Julio now low, and who's in the thick of it? It's Sam. He retreats on the back of that piercing moonlight, and that means Polar Bear Mike can just pick up where he left off. SMITE OK gets the kill onto your core, and just like that, the House of Cards, the Leviathans built up, have collapsed. Wrong you collected as well. Still haven't gotten the tier 2 fell, as the Dragons will go back and clean that up, but what a fight. Panatom, that's about as ill-advised as I've ever seen. Yes, you're going to have to retreat from that one. And now the Leviathans can start to clean up. Mike does move in, and Panatom low. They're going to have to retreat and find another way to reset this defense.
And they've got Sustain on the Jade Dragons. It's not the typical Aphrodite or Yemoja, but Terra Cupid will get the job done. They're going to try and end the game here.
Panatom, Shinto, and Julio, the only thing keeping Leviathans in this set, 28 minutes in, and the Dragons are on the order side. Titan, Fine OK pulled in, but has beads. Mike low, but the Titan at half HP as well. They've gotten rid of the tanks, so the carries have to commit, but Panatom has a double kill, but I'm a Monster says we're done. Panatom goes down, the Titan as well, and the Dragons find a way to get the 2-0.
Still down in kills when they end the game, by the way. 9-11 in favor of the Leviathans, for the Jade Dragons stay squeaky clean in the record department. They're the only undefeated team left in the SPL. I gotta say, I love the strategy from the Leviathans. They spread out the map early, and they really kept the defense thin there for the Jade Dragons. But it's just one objective call mistake that goes wrong, followed by a second objective call mistake that goes wrong. I think they had to do a better job of finding fights instead of going for these objectives. They bought into doing these Fire Giants when the strength of the Jade Dragons draft was fighting around those objectives because they had the better secure. Just a little bit of a miscall, I think, from the Leviathans. The first 10 minutes, 15 minutes of strategy, amazing. After that, they got a little lost.
And I feel like they also didn't put their carries, who they kind of hyper-farmed, right, whose builds they accelerated, in the position to do the best they could. I thought initially maybe we weren't getting enough out of Yarkor and Shinto, but really, as you kind of said, those objective fights weren't really where those backline carries got to thrive, right? That wasn't really their strengths. So if you want to pick up a Jade Dragons uniform and celebrate the undefeated record, why don't you go ahead and hit up Insight Apparel shop.smiteproleague.com, and you can go grab yourself a Fine OK jersey. Maybe get a hurry one since he was the one that stole that last objective, a Mike one, if you want to rep the guy that stole the first one just with Terra Walls. Not bad here from Rock Leo 1999. Looking pretty good in the Fine OK jersey.
No doubt about that. Yeah, I think you're right to mention that the carries didn't really get the opportunity there for the Leviathans. Carries, when they're fed, they usually fight best on those front-to-back fights where they're hitting the tanks first, who's right in front of them, and then they get to go into the back line after that. When you're condensed on a Fire Giant, playing front-to-back is a lot harder. It's a lot easier for those tanks to get on top of you alongside the backline damage. And so when you condense those fights, that farm doesn't matter quite as much because multiple bodies can get on top of the carry at the same time.
So good stuff from the Leviathans. I think they put a little bit of a scare in the Dragons. Maybe they're in game 2, but nothing they could not handle. Their Dragons remain undefeated. We'll be back to break it all down after this break.
Welcome back to Season 8 of the SPL, powered by our friends over at Alienware. Make sure to check out Alienware at Alienware on Twitter and Instagram. And then if you want some new gaming gear, you can't download more RAM, but you can sure buy a computer with more in it. That's SMITE AW at smitegame.com/Alienware, so check them out. Thanks again to Alienware for being our title sponsor here in Season 8 of the SPL. Mifflin, what goes wrong here in game number 2, my man? I mean, we're looking at a Jade Dragons team that is far and away behind in the early game. The Leviathans are looking clean. And then you forget, I guess, that Asilla has pretty good objective secure.
Well, you don't forget. I think, if anything, we just have to wholesale revoke the Leviathan's Fire Giant card. Whoever their shot caller is, they got to pass the baton on to the next guy in line. Just for the Fire Giant calls, everything else still incredibly clean from them. But you can't be getting 2 stolen away from you in the same game, let alone the same set. Just a tough loss there. But it's in the cards. You know it. Merlin doesn't have the confirm. They even tried to attempt to turn him into some fights. Aggro broke it down perfectly on the cast. It just felt like a little bit of a desync on the decision-making on whether or not you need to hold the Fire Giant or fold it.
And I think what's important here, before we go into what the Jade Dragons did right, because a lot of it was stealing away the FG, this was the closest, except for maybe one of the Kings games against the Dragons at the very beginning of the phase, looked against this Dragons team. Outside of the FG steals, outside of the calls where PBM steals one and Scylla steals the other, this Leviathans team was in control of this game. So that should give you some hope, I think, if you're a fan of the Leviathans or a fan of any other team but the Dragons winning some of these games. But now it's what the Dragons did right, Miff. I mean, they were able to survive some of that onslaught. They lost the game in the kills department, but they never let it get too far out of control.
Yeah, I mean, this was really, I think it did come down to majority this set match to the objective steals. You don't really end games often down in the kills department and feel too great about it. I'm sure the Dragons are feeling just fine going into it. Final K, again, reprising a phenomenal performance, as does Hurrywin, but Sanford Soccer and Panicat, due to aggression targeted towards both of those players, do fall down pretty heavily in this one. 2 and 4 for the jungler, 1 and 4 for the ADC, who got a little bit of that streamer special. Panicat, surely used to it by now, been streaming Smite for a long time, no stranger to dying between his towers.
Leviathans will end up facing the Oni Warriors next time we see this squad. What's the game plan? You're their coach. You're behind the scenes. You're just telling them to keep doing their thing, keep that head up, and maybe don't coin flip the objectives next time?
I'm saying, look, if we want to, go for objectives around the 20-minute mark, maybe just pick a god that hits for more than 100 per tick. Outside of that, I think the Leviathans don't have much to worry about. These guys are looking incredibly strong. Only have 1 loss so far this year, and it's to the best who have ever done it. I think that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes these games can be difficult to break down because the team that loses did almost everything right throughout the majority of the game, but then they do 2 very big things wrong, I guess, around the Fire Giants. But it's important to remember that the Dragons put themselves in that position in order to get those steals, in order to take this game away from the Leviathans. If you're losing a fight around the FG before you give yourself a chance to steal it away, then it doesn't matter at the end of the day. So, the Jade Dragons, they continue to roll here. They'll play, I don't know, a team that's not undefeated in the Leviathans here moving forward. Let's take a look at the schedule that we've had up to this point so far this weekend. All 2-0s, all pretty quick 2-0s. It was yesterday the Olympus Bolts, I believe, had the fastest couple of games, or the Kings had the fastest couple of games in back-to-back games there. And then the Jade Dragons roll through the Leviathans in 2 here on this Saturday. Tartarus Titans versus Solar Scarabs, that's the one that's coming up next. Don't you worry, if you're a Leviathans fan, you'll get to see them tomorrow morning up against the Oni Warriors. Updated standings, only 1 remaining undefeated team, and it is the Jade Dragons after 4 games. Every team, except for a couple, has played 4 games. The Solar Scarabs and the Tartarus Titans will remedy that for us. So, Miff, quick thoughts. You and I will be on the cast for the Solar Scarabs versus the Tartarus Titans. What do you like there in that matchup?
It's the super team that hasn't quite found their super just yet up against the Box Boys. I'm going to be very excited for the Baronic versus Paul matchup in mid, and I really want to keep my eyes in particular, as I always do, Dave, you love to roast me for it, on the junglers. Layers has been finding his footing week in and week out, but Scary D, I think, is still struggling to find his identity in a new role.
That's right. There have been moments where Scary D has shown those flashes of brilliance. but getting that going on a consistent basis important for the Titans. But look, this one was the match of the week: the Leviathans versus the Jade Dragons. Game 1 was Jade Dragons from start to finish, was not particularly close there. And then as a bit of a recap of Game 2, the Leviathans on basically cooldown, sitting over there on Panda Cat. It's gank after gank. They keep this Cupid down, but then it's a couple slip-ups around the FG that give this set in Game 2 on over to the Jade Dragons. That's going to be it for set number 1, but we can't leave without a post-game interview. We got Finch and Fine OK standing by.
Fine OK, how you feeling, man? We got to talk about that Game 2, because even though you won, things weren't looking great at the beginning. What was the team feeling like, and how'd you guys manage to turn things around?
Honestly, it was just like a rank game for Panda Cat. I feel like he's just getting camped behind his tower, you know. Honestly, I wish we had Breznov in that scenario, because Breznov never dies to those ganks. That's the thing. But no, they just got that lead early. They put Panda behind, kind of focused on him a little bit. I never really got behind, and you know, that's always good. Even without the objective secures, I think we always had a chance to come back in that game, just because I think our late game was a little bit better as team comp wise. But they also, you know, they drafted Merlin, and that's a character that's never going to be able to secure objectives. So they have to just be better at pulling them.
Yeah, I don't think you guys were ever more than, like, 3,500 gold down, maybe even less than that, really. So you're always within striking distance. Your team now, the only undefeated team. Is there, I mean, I know you guys want to win every game, but do you guys think you're putting any extra dedicated focus into trying to keep this streak alive, or are you just going into each game as they come?
Yeah, it's always a mix of both, but I think it's, you know, it's good to be proud of being undefeated, and it's not only fun, but it's good to, like, if you think you're the best team and you think you're the best players, to try and dominate as much as possible. My voting's going crazy in the background, but yeah, just it's like it's something we definitely strive for. I mean, you know, if you want to be regarded as some of the best players of all time, you're gonna have to dominate as much as you can.
And I think you guys are already making a pretty good run towards that claim. Fine, okay, we'll see if maybe you guys can solidify it here this season. Thanks for talking to me, man. You still got another really good set coming up, though, so we're going to take a quick break here on the broadcast and be right back with set 2.